Date with a Debut is a Words and Nerds and Breathe Art podcasts co-production recorded on a Wagnical country. And I pay my respects to all elders, past and present, and extend that to any First Nations people tuning in. Always was, always will be, Aboriginal land. On with the show.
I wanted to overemphasize the Australian division. I wanted because that to me is way more relatable and far more scary than painting some alien force, some alien invader coming to the country and taking it over.
Welcome to Date with a Debut, a podcast about debut authors, their incredible books, and their journey to publication. If you are looking for a new author to discover or writing inspiration for your own story and you don't know where to start, this is the place to be. I'm Nick Wasiliev, author of When Men Cry and your host for today's show, and I'm delighted to welcome another debut author in today's episode. If you enjoy this show, or indeed any other shows on the Words and Nerds platform, jump online and give us a thumbs up, a 5-star review, wherever you are listening. Thank you for listening to us and for supporting the Australian book industry. You can also find any books mentioned in today's podcast down in the description. Today I'm joined by Mark Wales, formerly of the Australian Special Forces. He's a veteran, now a corporate speaker, TV reality star, actor, and author of the memoir Survivor. However, we're here today to talk about his brand new fiction debut, Outrider, published by Macmillan, which you can get a copy of right now in the description. Kicking off this discussion, I asked Mark about his experiences of transitioning over from writing memoir and pulling from his own experiences to crafting worlds of fiction, and also how being on the set of an exciting blockbuster film inspired his writing. I am super delighted to welcome Mark Wales to Date with a Debut. Mark, welcome.
Nick, thanks for having me, mate.
So, I mean, we're going in on a technicality here because we were alluding to a little bit earlier, just before we started talking, that this is your first fiction debut. But you originally had also written Survivor, which was kind of how I first heard of you down the grapevine a couple of years ago. First of all, how was the transition? Was it a strange experience as a writer?
I got to admit, I was pretty cocky after I wrote Survivor. You know, it sold pretty well. I did the manuscript pretty quickly. I was like, this fiction stuff, how hard can it be? Turns out very hard when you've got to actually create the world and you've got to create the characters and the narrative arc. I think it's twice as much work, really, probably even more. It's rewarding as well, and I think in terms of a market, I think there is a much greater market attached to kind of escapism fiction compared to kind of narrative nonfiction, which is more kind of niche, I think. Yeah.
I also just want to ask, before we actually dive into talking about the book and the characters and the setting, the Australia that you have created in it, I read with interest. I'm a massive Mad Max fan, and you immediately know where this comes. Yeah, there it is. He knows exactly where this is going. And I know that you appeared in Furiosa. And I know that they wrapped up filming, obviously, quite a while ago. But please tell me that I don't want to say, like, again, colouring my enjoyment of Outrider, but there was some Mad Max little Easter egg stuff. Tell me, were you writing it while you were on set?
So I was about a third of the way through the manuscript, and then I went onto the set at it was a couple of years back now. It was like we filmed it like over 18 months ago, and I had to pause my writing for a bit, but even better than that, I got to stand in George Miller's creation as a character, which when you're a writer, there's just nothing better. And the details of the set and the characters that he'd built, and even talking to actors, there was a top actor there that told me how he thought about his character, and he goes, I think my character harbors these demons and he's motivated by this. Hearing those things, which never made it to the screen, but are such a key component of how that character managed himself on screen. Mate, it was a storyteller's dream to be in that world. So I was, and mate, just a film nerd's dream to be in Mad Max. So
how much of a fan were you? How much of a fan were you?
Mate, huge fan. Yeah, loved it. I said if there's only one film I ever do, it would have to be a Mad Max film.
I haven't had the chance to see it yet, but I was obsessed with Fury Road when it came out. Not just because of it's just a barrage. But it's the storytelling. It tickles my writer head because it's the visual storytelling that is happening in the background, the entire world they've created and everything.
Almost no dialogue as well.
Yeah.
It's like a Western almost. It's incredible how he does it.
Yeah, George. Well, we can just aspire to be like George Miller because, Mate, God,
we got a copy of the proof to him. I feel like we left it a bit late because he was flat out in final editing, and we were gunning for a cover quote, but we just couldn't get one. But maybe if we get a reprint, fingers crossed, we can get George Miller on the cover.
I certainly hope so because what a ringing endorsement from the creator of the Mad Max world himself. Without further ado, though, let us dive into Outrider. And I first of all just want to, we usually start these kind of discussions by giving you the classic elevator pitch. So what is Outrider about?
Well, Outrider is about a father and a son trying to escape a civil war set in the near future in Australia. And it's about the drama and the tension of trying to protect a child while there's a war going on all around you.
I love that you've kept it succinct and kept it to the point because we try to stay as spoiler free as possible, but I love kind of the opening kind of settings that you gave us with some really simple stuff. First of all, for any lovers out there, you've got a map, which right at the start of the book, which I don't know, I'm just a sucker for maps. And just the fact that you had actually put it, for everyone who's kind of seeing it on YouTube, I'm putting it up to the screen, but like how you've actually got different areas, you're highlighting which particular parts of Australia are occupied territories, an area that's no man's land, and as well as free Australia, which is kind of this area that is an endpoint that Jack and Harry are trying to get to. My God, a lot Mate, to unpack here.
The map freaked me out a bit when I saw it. I was like, ooh, I didn't... That's a bit nasty, isn't it? Like where our country's kind of half occupied. I was a little bit worried. I'm like, oh, this might be a bit more nasty than I thought. But as soon as you see that map, you know this is a different world. It's a different time. Yes. And it's good. It's kind of a nightmare come to life, and that's where that escapism and drama comes from.
Maybe it's the like. Sometimes I find myself going to sleep at night listening to things like war graphics and hearing about what actual hypotheticals could it look like, for example, if Australia was invaded, and that how it actually is quite a difficult, challenging terrain to, even though we haven't got a huge population, how difficult it is to navigate. But in this world, it's 2029. I believe it started with a war in Taiwan, is where once the boots got on the ground in Taiwan, everything just went to shit. And the first thing I want to ask you about is actually crafting action on the page. We were talking about it before we started recording, but obviously immediately I went to Survivor as my framework to examine how you kind of crafted this. But there was a real sense of you treaded a line, which I really like. You know, a lot of people will think of Matthew Riley as some of the great action writers, but there was something a lot more grounded in how you wrote your action scenes and the visceral nature of it. Tell me a little bit about that and that process.
So I don't know where I got this from. I think it was from Stephen King on writing. He goes, look, you don't need to explain everything to the reader. You can really just offer some anchor points and let them paint the rest of the picture themselves. It really is, you almost say more with that scene than you do if you're trying to explain it in detail. So he was kind of saying, look, don't treat your readers like idiots. Let them construct some of the world based off a couple of anchors that you give them. And I just tried to add some of the details that I remember when I was in combat. There are certain tiny things I can remember, like, and I put them in the book, like the feel of a checked grip in your hand when you're holding a rifle, or the feeling when you're running, right? How your legs feel when you're in combat, or the look on someone's face. If you see someone at close range, you know, and you're in contact. Those little things, they're only small details, but they say a lot about what's happening in that particular scene and some of the desperation. And that's just how I tried to conduct the scenes, like not over-explain it, but give enough so that people could feel like they were there.
Found myself being more connected to Jack. I mean, obviously, you a lot of the story is viewed from his mindset, but I really got a sense of who he was more of a person through his action, like the way he actually approaches action as kind of this special operations soldier, and kind of in this resistance group. The space that Jack is in this headspace, even before we get to the situation with his son, is already battle hardened, drilled to the point, but also a clear focus with what he is trying to do with any objective or goal that he has in front of him.
Yeah, he's almost got that kind of on switch that you see in those top units or first responders. But in the backdrop, he's older. He's been at it for a long time. It's in his home. He's trying to build a life as well. He's not perfect. He makes mistakes in battle and whatnot. And those little things, I think, just make him a little bit more relatable.
One other thing that I've really like, the moment that because one of the early moments, and I think this is not a spoiler when we say this, is one of the very first scenes we have with him is with his wife, who, of course, she's in his arms, and that's all that really needs to be said. And so you get a real driving sense of him as a person, and then you contrast that with Harry in this as well, which adds another dynamic. Tell me about first of all about, because with that particular setting, Harry very much would color a lot of the ways that Jack looks at the world and the focus of that. So tell me about that dynamic that you had between Jack and Harry and how that was kind of crafted.
Yeah, so Jack has already suffered a serious loss in his family. His son is his only real close family left, and he wants to protect him at all costs. He wants to protect him, but he also wants him to be with him all the time so that he's not left to his own devices, and Jack feels that sense of responsibility towards him. Harry was a hard character to fill out. He had to be innocent. He had to also be intelligent and see the world in a different way to his father. And I think it's a good contrast. You've got that kind of young innocence, and then you've got a father that's probably seen too much. And he's trying to preserve that innocence in his son while teaching him that the world, as we know it in Australia, is now totally different.
That's what I think really, really brought it home, the contrast, not just because for us as a reader, I found myself really being drawn to Harry because Harry was familiar with the world that we know now, a world that is not consumed by war and not consumed by a lot of things that you look on the news and you see it everywhere, but we're very lucky here in Australia that we live in such a peaceful place, at a place that has not seen such conflict. And I found it quite a valuable framing device in terms of just looking at Harry as a person and how it helped me latch onto him, and also why Jack does what he does.
Yeah, and you can see some of Harry's intrigue about what he's seeing, and it's the same thing I had when I was a kid. You think it's cool seeing all these soldiers and the combat and the machinery, but behind that curtain is a bit of a horror show, and Jack knows that, and he's trying to keep his son from witnessing too much of it. So
we have the parts of Australia that are occupied that we have to go through. We have no man's land, or the kind of that area that is like right in the center of Australia. But then we also have free Australia. And these particular different environments and settings that you create with all of them as we make our way through this story. First of all, just seeing, for me, who has not experienced combat and not been in that environment, seeing this land that I have grown up in transformed was, look, it takes you back. It really does. I mean, it is an action story and a fictional story, but it also takes you back a bit. Imagining what such a scenario could look like unfolding in front of your eyes. But I imagine for you, it probably would not have been as difficult given that setting. But what was it like transforming your own homeland into that sort of setting?
It was great fun because I've had those thoughts. I'm like, what would actually happen? Like, if a resistance formed in the country, where would it be? What would it look like? How would society reorganize itself? That to me is a really interesting question. It happens in countries all the time, Israel, Ukraine, these countries that are, their existence is at threat, they reorganise their society and the roles that people play, the occupations. They all become geared towards survival. And that's kind of what I enjoyed about this, is like you get to pull away some of the facades we've built around our world in the 21st century. They all go away, and what's left is tribes and survival and hope, and that's it.
It definitely felt like a different... I mean, it still felt like the Australia that we're familiar with, but it did almost feel like a character in itself. The landscape itself and the way that you crafted war-torn Australia. I have actually no question to say here. I just found it so engrossing. And also, obviously, a place that, as much as the actual forces that are at stake, was as much itself a key part for Jack and Harry's journey.
Mate, that makes my day, because it was an undertaking having to build it. But I mean, the other thing that I was working hard to avoid was that kind of trope of alien invaders.
Yeah.
I wanted to avoid that, and I think I wanted to overemphasize the Australian division. I wanted, because that to me is way more relatable and far more scary than painting some alien force, some alien invader coming to the country and taking it over. That to me is kind of an old-fashioned story that's kind of well worn. Whereas the whole Civil War piece, that to me is far more concerning.
There is of course the threat of the invader, but the Civil War itself. This is people who know this land like you.
Yeah, it's like someone at a checkpoint wearing a Adelaide Crows jersey, holding a automatic weapon. Like, that to me is a terrifying vision.
Yeah,
more
yes.
The Adelaide Crows jersey than the weapon, but but just little things like that I thought is an interesting kind of place to go to.
And I love that would be immediately one of my first reactions as well. It's like, you go for that team? Fuck me.
Clearly a villain.
I really do want to dive into the book a little bit more, but I want to keep it spoiler-free as possible. And instead, I want to kind of also pivot a little bit to your writing journey about with this creating this fiction world, particularly. Obviously, the contrast between writing a memoir with Survivor is very different to writing fiction, and you did touch on it a little bit earlier. How it's a lot of world building, a lot of stuff, extra stuff around that when crafting this. Talk to me about the actual process when you kind of sat down with this scenario. First of all, where the hell did this scenario kind of come from? It had always been sitting in the back of your head. And then once you did that and you kind of had this story and you presented it to Pam Macmillan, how was it like crafting it and putting it together?
Mate, I thought about this. I thought about this story at some point. It was actually during the lockdowns in Melbourne. I was like, imagine if, and my editor's going to hate me for this. He's like, don't talk about COVID. People don't want to hear about it. But I was like, what if the basic functions of society just went away? And so we couldn't feed people. We had no energy. There were no first responders. All the services that we have just disappeared. I was like, well, that'd be a pretty interesting scenario. And what would happen if a state completely collapsed economically? Like, would we be open to some sort of foreign interference? Who knows? And so I came up with these ideas, and I'm like, well, hang on, what if all the things we were doing overseas as a country, we brought back to Australia and had a scenario play out where, it's someone else playing with our country, and we're in the middle of this game, we're pawns in this game being played by a much larger power. That could be such an interesting world, and it would totally change our country. It would change our society, and that was the premise of the story. I'm like, let's build a world where part of Australia's collapsed, part is taken over, people are just trying to survive, and we've all just broken down to these little tribes.
I love that is what of course it came during COVID. Like, so many stories and so many particular stories of like a certain nature arrived while we were all sitting at home in that set down. So I am not surprised that this was a COVID book that arrived out of the blue. What was it like with Pam Macmillan? Kind of, did you take it to them, or did you have the manuscript completed after you had Survivor? And then once you had that, I know that the back and forth, because obviously it would have been a new experience for you, even though you were touching on subject matter that you are very familiar with. Obviously, as you alluded to, fiction is another beast to memoir.
It's a big pivot, and I had this discussion with my editor. So it's Alex Lloyd at Macmillan. He's actually Matthew Riley's editor as well, which is where the map came from. That was Alex's idea. So good shout out to Alex. But Alex said, and I've been thinking about another book for a while, and I'd had this idea about doing a non-fiction book on kind of leadership, and that complements my kind of speaking career. And I was thinking about it. I'm like, I just couldn't get excited about it. But I had this other idea about fiction where Australian society kind of collapses into this civil war, and a father and a son are trying to escape it. And I was way more excited by that. And when I pitched it to Alex, he's like, I think this is good. Why don't you write a treatment up, and I'll take it to the team. I think they have monthly kind of roundtables where they pitch stories that they want to acquire. And so they already knew me from the non-fiction book. They knew I could deliver, but it is a big step going into fiction. So I wrote up about a 10,000 word treatment, and Alex took it to the table, and they're like, let's go, let's do it.
Was there anything that surprised you, like writing fiction?
Yeah, it was the mental horsepower needed because it feels like you're kind of simultaneously interpreting. You're having to think up this world and these characters. You're having to get them to act in a certain way, and then you have to translate it all to the page. So there's a lot happening kind of mentally, and it takes a lot of, you have to be absorbed in it for a long time. I'd set my writing time at about 3 hours a day, but I would be thinking about it for the rest of the day. I'd be like, how do I want that scene to unfold? You know, what's this person going to do? What's a good twist? And that would take up a lot of my time outside of writing. So I felt like all the setup was happening between writing, and writing I'd just execute what I'd thought about.
Absolutely. And it's how handy as well that you had Alex there alongside you, particularly just as such an experienced head when it comes to editing other quality books. Did Matthew get the chance to check out an early version of Outrider?
I don't think we got him well, maybe we did. Alex was onto that, but I think he was pretty busy with one of his own projects. So, I mean, he's probably busy. A bit more. Yeah, he'd be flat out. So, but we got a lot of proofs sent out, so that was good.
I appreciate, Jack, that you got Jack Heath, the seal of approval from him, because I'm a big fan of him. I think he's great.
Mate, what a compliment coming from him, and it's so nice to have established authors helping out kind of up and coming or new authors. I think that's a really nice thing for them to do. What's next? Will we see? I feel like as I was kind of coming to the end of this story, I got the feeling that we're going to see more of Jack Dunn. Will there be more? Mate, I've already outlined another book. If this one goes well, there's certainly scope for more Jack Dunn. I think I've left it open. There's another part. There are other parts of Australia that are totally open and are facing their own issues. So I'm sure Jack Dunn and Harry can go there and maybe help out a bit.
I feel like with the world that you've created, we've got to see more. Like I want to see more.
This has a long way to run. I think it's fun in that sense, and especially even with Harry. Like he's a young man now, but in the years that come, he'll become a young fighter perhaps, or a politician. Who knows?
We like to finish off the podcast with a quick-fire, rapid-fire section where I just throw a bunch of questions at you, and you give me the first answer that comes to your head. So what we'll do is we'll kick off. I think when in the treatment I sent to you earlier, I gave you prep for a 2 of the starting questions in regards to your book tastes and things that you've been enjoying. Yes. So I want to hit you with the first question, which is, what is your favorite book that you have read in the last 12 months?
Oh. A non-fiction one, which is actually kind of old now, but it's called Blind Man's Bluff, and it's a submarine warfare book that came out in the late 90s. Mm-hmm. And I remember seeing it at the bookshelf when I was at the Defence Academy. I never read it. I finally bought it, and it is a cracking read. It's really good.
I've never heard of Blind Man's Bluff, but I mean, that sounds like as alluded to, I want to improve my action reading capabilities and new books. So another one to add to the TBR pile that's about 5 meters high.
And the other one that I've reread and just love is Blood Meridian by Cormac.
Oh yes, yeah, that's great.
I just think, mate, it's a before and after moment in life reading that book. It's such a good depiction of really an apocalypse, but
he's such a good writer.
In the 1800s, he's so good.
Yeah, he's such a good writer. I love it. Some of my favorite. Yeah, The Great Late. It's so many great moments of action and great ideas of stories have come out of his hands, and it's just I love it. I love it so much. What's your favorite debut novel that you've ever read?
Ready Player One.
Oh, yes.
That was a cracker, and I have to. I give him so much credit for his world building, because that again was a really great effort, and the way he built not just a real world but a virtual world as well, plus all the kind of pop culture references that went along with it. I think that was a really good effort.
Yeah, it's just not just the fact that it's all happening inside the Oasis and everything like that, but just part of me had always wondered when they were going to adapt it to a film, like the amount of budget that would have been set for IP. In all that intellectual property, insane. But it's great. That's such a great story. Did you read the second one?
I did. I didn't love it. I didn't love the second one, but I mean, how was it received critically? The second one. Yeah. I feel like he spent a long time on the first one, and I feel like maybe he got a bit more pressure with the second one to bring that out quicker. I think the second one's hard, right? Because people are under a bit more of a time pressure and maybe expectations. So
I think it depends on the person, because some people, for example, if you've planned out a trilogy or whatever, and the first one is really successful, the second one can often be the one where you feel no pressure, because you know that whatever it is, it's people are going to work it and roll with it. But each their own.
Another author I've kept an eye on is Jack Carr. So, and he's got that very Michael. Is it Michael? I can't remember the comparison authors, but he's done really well. He's ex-Navy SEAL. He's written some great kind of action books, very revenge-based, probably a little bit flag-wavy for my liking, but still really good reads. And he's done an amazing job with just the commercial side of it.
Well, love the sound of those. Do you have a favourite word?
I don't have a favourite word, but no, there was a couple I was overusing in the book. Filthy, for some reason. Filthy. Alex is like, find something else. You've overused it. That was one. And then there's an editor I keep reading who seems to use the word grotesque like every couple of paragraphs in his editorials. I'm like, mate, you got to dial that back.
Yeah, I do love that. Sometimes you can get pulled towards a particular word if you in trying to nail a setting or an environment. Gritty, I think that's filthy. Filthy is a good way to describe it. Yeah. If there was one particular story, like whether it be a story about from a military background or action-based story or book that you think is underrated, what do you think it is?
That's a good one. That's a good question, because there's some cracker reads out there that I felt were a bit underrated. Probably one is, I think, Cormac McCarthy's last two that he released just before he died. To me, when I read it, I'm like, this doesn't have the heft of some of his earlier work, but I still think he was in such a different part of his life. He was old. He knew he was kind of at the end of his life. So they are more philosophical in that sense, and I think in time they'll be recognised as some of his greatest work.
I love Cormac McCarthy's last couple of books. I mean, I mean, before Blood Meridian, My Way In was No Country for Old Men. And I can't believe that apparently critics were a bit off on the book when it came out, because I just went, this is amazing.
No, that was such a Spartan and the best villain I've seen probably ever. And actually, when they made the film, they wanted the guy's hair to look like one of the Crusaders. Some of the old images and paintings they'd seen of Crusaders had hair like that, and that summed him up, because he really was someone that believed in some greater cause, but he was such a villain.
Great movie, great story,
Yeah.
all of it, to be honest. And then, of course, The Road as well as another personal favorite. But yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned Stella Maris and The Passenger.
Yes,
those are the lots. Yes, yeah.
The other one that's a bit underrated, I think, especially if you're interested in writing, is On Writing by Stephen King. That to me was the most. It's a memoir really, but it's an encouraging story about his journey with writing and his tips for writers as well. And I guess, to me it was such an inspiring read. That got me into writing. Really, I've been thinking about it for ages, and then when I read that, I'm like, right, I think I'll get started. It's a great read. It'll
galvanise you if you're in that writing rut. You get into a lift, and the person you've always wanted to meet is in there. Who is it?
Oh, probably Charlize Theron from Fury Road.
Oh, oh my God!
I've met George Miller. I was going to say George Miller, but I'm like, I've met him already, so I'm lucky. But Charlize Theron, haven't met her, but obviously, wouldn't be a bad person to get into a lift with and hear her stories.
Now I just want to know, like, okay, let's do a spontaneous extra question. You're going up to, like, I don't know. You're going up one floor and you've got time for one question. What would you ask her? Not what floor are you going to?
Are you coming back for the Fury Road sequel?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Her and Tom Hardy. I hope they'll be back.
I hope so. I know that the whole making of that movie was chaotic as all hell, and they had a rough time on it. But I know that they look at that time very differently now. So
yeah,
fingers crossed. And then last question before we wrap up: are you happy?
Yes, mate. I am. Especially after tearing my hair out on this book for a long time. This is. To get to the end and do the release work, that's when it becomes a team sport. And as you know, any sort of writing it's hard because you can't really share it. You can't really talk about it that much because there's no point. The story's not finished. But when it's done and you start working on the release material, that's when the fun really starts. Yeah,
absolutely. And I'm glad to hear it. And I'm glad that by the time everyone listens to this beautiful book will be out in the world. If you can, go and get yourself a copy of Outrider by Mark Wales. It is gritty, it is brutal, but it is also absolutely enthralling. Mark, thank you so much for being on the show.
Nick, thanks, mate, and congrats on the podcast. It's a great idea, and I'm so glad you're doing it for debut authors.
Thanks, man. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Date with a Debut, and for listening to the Words and Nerds channel. You can buy all books mentioned in today's episode down in the description box, and if you enjoyed the show, or indeed any episode of Words and Nerds, drop us a review, leave us 5 stars or a thumbs up. It is hugely appreciated. Catch you soon.